My husband's best friend's son is getting touchy-feely with my daughter, and that wouldn't be a problem, but I think my husband is his father, so I don't know how to prevent them from going full-on Alabama. Posted by you/Psych Factor. This began as a dark, intrusive thought that I could never shake off, and over the years, it has bloomed into a poisonous flower that infects my entire psyche. I, 42F, am married to my husband Luke, 43M, and he has a female best friend Amy, 43F. I met Luke in college, but he's known Amy since they were about 7. They do everything together and understand each other implicitly. They've always insisted that they are surrogate siblings. Naturally, I, as a new girlfriend, felt a little threatened by Amy and her closeness to Luke, but they both reassured me I had nothing to worry about, that their bond was not romantic and had never been intimate, that Amy really was just the sister Luke never had. I believed them, and it didn't take long for me to forget any insecurity I had about Amy. She became my friend too. She officiated our wedding. Luke and I have built a wonderful life together, and we've always had a strong relationship. After we got married and moved in together, we still saw a lot of Amy, and I was fine with that. I've spent many nights on the town trying to help Amy find a man, as she has always lamented how unlucky she is in love. Luke and I started having children after we were married, and around the same time, so did Amy. For further context, my children are Sophie, 15, Owen, 12, Louise, 10, and Carter, 6. Amy's children are Tom, 17, Haley, 14, and the twins, Adam and Jenna, 9. Now, Amy was not in a relationship at this point. She was not married. As far as I knew, she was dating but not consistently. As Luke and I had more kids and our family grew, periodically, Amy would find herself pregnant as well. This happened a few times, and Luke and I never knew anything about the father or fathers in question. I kind of assumed that maybe Amy was sleeping around and not keeping in contact with her one-night stands. Luke agreed this was probably the answer. While I did ask each time if Amy knew the paternity, she always said no, and she didn't seem that worried about the idea of raising kids on her own, so I didn't pester her. Of course, she had us to support her, so there was that. While Amy never asked for any help, Luke was never going to let his best friend struggle to stay afloat when she had children to raise. Financially, we are very fortunate and privileged. I have a job that pays handsomely, and Luke also had wealthy parents who already knew and loved Amy, so they were happy to provide for her. My in-laws defy all stereotypes, they are the kindest and gentlest people. So we were able to support Amy, to get her somewhere to stay with her kids. People might be tempted to call her a leech, but I never saw it that way, none of us did. She needed help, and we could provide it. I also know people are going to criticize her for her lack of responsibility and question why she never used more reliable birth control. Honestly, that's a long story I don't want to get into because even I don't fully understand her reasoning, but it was quite important to her that she never be on birth control and that whatever came of that choice, she would accept. It wasn't religiously motivated, I know that, but it held that degree of significance to Amy. She really did not want to take birth control. She's explained it to me more than once, but I'm still not clear on why. Of course, with Amy being Luke's best friend since they were kids, it's not unreasonable that they sometimes hang out together when I'm not there. Hey, that's fine. Sometimes I hang out with Amy one-on-one as well, though Luke does it more often. After all, she was his friend first. This included him going over to where she was staying and, at times, sleeping over there. Was I a fool to trust him and believe nothing was going on? Perhaps. But for years, they presented themselves as buddies, like siblings. I never picked up on any vibes between them, not ever. As one might expect, our children were brought up together. Not in the same house, our home is decently sized, but even we don't have room for 8 kids, but we made sure Amy's children met ours from a young age, and they always got along. Strong bonds of friendship have formed over the years, which is good, especially if I'm right and they share blood. I've been dawdling getting to the main point. Yes, I have come to suspect that Luke fathered at least one of Amy's kids, if not all of them. Frankly, I do suspect they are all his. I would never have believed my husband to be capable of such a thing, and he's given me no indication that he is the unfaithful sort. But he does spend a lot of time with Amy, and I have to confess I cannot remember ever seeing her with a real boyfriend over the years. She would talk to men at bars and parties, I would try to be her wingman, and so on. But nothing ever seemed to really happen. So when she got pregnant the first time, I was curious. When it happened again and again, I began to wonder if she had some sort of secret fella she didn't want us to know about for whatever reason. But I couldn't think of any reason why she would hide him, especially from her children. After Carter, our youngest, was born, Luke and I agreed that the time had come for him to have a vasectomy. Amy's twins had arrived just a couple of years prior. Of course, after the procedure, Luke and I continued to make love, but I no longer had to think about pregnancy. Meanwhile, Amy never got pregnant again after the twins. Is it a coincidence that Luke had a vasectomy and then both of us stopped getting pregnant? I don't know. But Luke would still visit her, and he wasn't just going to see her but checking up on her children as well. In general, I should have paid more attention to it sooner, but Luke has always acted like a father to them, especially as they've gotten older. He's the father they never had. He doesn't neglect me or our children, not one bit. He's doing double duty. On its own, the idea that he is a surrogate father to Amy's fatherless children isn't inherently suspicious. One could even call it noble. But it combines with a lot of other little things. There is appearance as well. I won't go into specifics of hair color, eye color, or unique physical traits, because I'd rather limit the identifying factors of the people involved and keep this whole thing as vague as possible. But suffice it to say, Amy's children, they certainly look like they could be Luke's. Kaylee has a very unusual allergy that Luke also has. The twins look very much like him, Adam in particular. The older Tom gets, the more I see Luke in his face and personality. While their race doesn't matter, the reality is that Luke is a different race than Amy, and Amy's children look pretty biracial. I could easily believe their father is the same race as Luke. That doesn't mean Luke has to be the father, but it sure seems like it. I have never voiced my anxieties to either Amy or Luke. I don't want to be the bad guy, and, guilty or innocent, I already know they would flatly deny my accusations and be hurt by them. Imagine if that drama reached the ears of my kids or Amy's kids? Either way, Luke continues to spend time with Amy and her children, just as her children spend time with mine. I've hinted to Luke that I feel needy for more attention and wish he wouldn't give as much to Amy, but he either missed my cues or pretended to miss them. I don't want to push the idea that he's favoring her, because it's not even really true. He's never neglected me for her. I just can't shake the feeling that Luke and Amy have been intimate before, likely numerous times. As far as I know, Amy never really wanted to be a mother, either. She wasn't opposed to it, and when each of her children came into the world, she instantly fell in love with them. But motherhood was never really a major part of her life plan or identity. In the grand scheme of things, when we would talk about the future, she would sometimes mention a husband and children, but it never seemed like something she had her heart particularly set on. So, I don't think this is a case of Luke just giving Amy children. I doubt that was the motive for the infidelity, that would have been a side effect. I've been letting this go and turning a blind eye for years. It was a dark thought in the back of my mind after Kaylee's allergy was discovered, but I dismissed it. It got worse after the twins were born, but again, I dismissed it. When Amy stopped having babies, I wanted to feel reassured by that. But Luke had gotten a vasectomy, so if anything, that made my anxiety worse. There have been nights when I wished the twins were younger, that they had come along after Luke's procedure. It's been twisting me into knots for a long time, but I don't want to be the one who rips our family apart, especially since, technically, I could be wrong. Except now, I'm very afraid, because in the last few months, we've had a new development in our kids' social circle. Tom, Amy's eldest, asked Sophie out. Sophie, my eldest. She's really blossomed over these last few years and has become quite the outspoken beauty, so I'm not shocked to see she's getting male attention, but Tom asking her out completely threw me. Sophie said no, but only because I'm quite protective when it comes to her exploring dating, and she knew she'd have to ask me first. I could tell she was flattered and intrigued by his interest and wanted to say yes. She approached me to talk about it. Bless my girl, she did everything right. I think she expected I would see things her way and agree that she could date Tom. Much to her surprise, I very firmly said no. That caused a bit of conflict. She didn't even want to date him that badly, she just couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to. And I couldn't explain it to her. All I could come up with was, he's too old for you, which he is, but it's not really about that. When Amy and Luke heard, I was so curious to see what their reactions would be. If either of them had agreed with Sophie and tried to convince me that the two of them should be allowed to date, I think I would have been relieved and taken that as proof that I was wrong about something going on between them, wrong about who fathered Amy's children. But the ambiguity continued. They took my side. Both of them put their foot down, though not as fiercely as I did. Luke agreed with me, but he also worried that trying to forbid such a romance would only make Sophie want it more. He's probably right about that. Amy seemed more apathetic to the idea. She didn't want Tom to date Sophie either, and she backed me up, but I don't know, she just wasn't taking it as seriously. She seemed to think it was a fleeting crush. Well, it wasn't. In the months following those conversations, Tom has spent more and more time with Sophie. They've been alone, or with other friends, whenever they possibly could. It's become abundantly clear that Tom is crazy about Sophie and wants to be with her, and he definitely wants to be physical. I've been watching them like a hawk and have noticed his eye wandering many times. While I'm doing everything I can to nip this budding romance in the crib, I also feel somewhat powerless. Sophie hasn't outwardly defied me, she's still just hanging out with Tom as friends. Forcing them to stop spending time together would seem unreasonable and probably encourage more sneaking around. But I'm so afraid that they're already doing just that. My nightmare is that they're secretly dating, doing who knows what when no one is looking. I've observed Tom being rather handsy with Sophie, and she doesn't seem to object at all. And I just don't know what to say. I had considered trying to convince Sophie that Tom is like her brother, but if she doesn't see him that way, I don't really have the power to rewrite their emotional dynamic or the history of their friendship. I've always seen Amy and her children as being like family, but my kids might see Amy's kids more as best friends. The problem, of course, is that if I'm right, if my husband has indeed been carrying on an affair over the years and is the father of Amy's children, then Tom and Sophie cannot be anything more than friends, under any circumstances. End of discussion. It can never happen. But I feel powerless to stop it. Luke has apparently talked to Tom about this, as has Amy, but he is unrelenting and won't give up on Sophie. I think she enjoys the attention and devotion. Tom has even confronted me, asking why I'm so against this when I know him well and know he would be good to Sophie. I didn't know what to say, other than to fall back on her being too young for him. But that won't work forever. If, God forbid, they're still attracted to each other in a few years, they'll pursue this with abandon, and once they're legal adults, there will be nothing I can do about it. Amy and Luke agree with me that Tom cannot date Sophie, but that's all they've really done. They seem to feel just as powerless as I do to prevent teen love. Sometimes, it genuinely feels like they've just given up, choosing to bury their heads in the sand and hope the feelings pass as Tom and Sophie get older. Sure, they're in high school, and it's unlikely Tom will be in love with Sophie forever. But my fear is that she'll let him do something intimate with her before that time comes, something neither of them can take back. I am this close to opening a door I cannot close, this close to screaming at Luke that none of this would be happening if he hadn't cheated on me all these years. If he hadn't been all but raising a second family with his surrogate sister behind my back. Now Luke's son wants to smash our daughter, his actual sister, because as far as he knows, she's just his childhood friend. And it's all Luke and Amy's fault for what they've done. If I speak up, everything gets blown to hell. On the off chance that I'm wrong, I'll be a horrible monster who accused the love of my life and one of my closest friends of doing something unforgivable. If I'm right, it still tears our entire structure apart. The family and social unit we've built over the last several years will be gone, and everyone will be stressed and upset, even if Luke and I don't divorce. If I do nothing, Sophie is eventually going to sleep with Tom and be his girlfriend, and I'm terrified it will happen sooner rather than later, or worse, that it's already happened under my nose. I hope to hell this relationship fades as they mature, but what if it doesn't? What if they stay together for years? What if they marry and want to have children someday? If I tell Sophie the truth about Amy's kids, then everyone else will find out too, and it will ruin so many lives. It would shatter my kids' perception of their father and their Aunt Amy. Luke is Owen's hero. I can't even bear to think about how much this would hurt him. And what about Amy's children? They are innocent in all of this. They didn't choose where they came from, and I don't want to hurt them. Even though I'm not happy with Tom at the moment, a week ago, I saw him put his hand on Sophie's thigh, and I wanted to knock his teeth out. He doesn't deserve the burden of knowing that the girl he's been fantasizing about is his half-sister. It's also messed up, and I don't know what to do. I've been looking the other way and letting my husband and his best friend insult me for such a long time. I thought I could live with it, but this situation with Tom and Sophie has me deeply distressed. Update 3 days later. First of all, wow, I did not expect my post to get as much traction as it did. I was half worried that someone in my family or social circle might find it, especially when someone alerted me that the post had been shared on Facebook. But, as far as I can tell, no one in my family has seen it. I want to thank all of the kind commenters who wished me well. To those who were more frustrated with my indecision, I get it, but I was dealing with an uncertain situation, and the stakes were incredibly high. I felt like no matter what choice I made, something could, and likely would, go wrong. I've spent the last 5 years imagining different scenarios based on various ways I could handle this, if I ever decided to act on it. To everyone who is clamoring for an update, I have one for you. I previously said that I was going to do a secret DNA test and had decided on that course of action. In the end, I couldn't go through with it, and now I regret that because the window to do so has essentially closed. It felt out of line for me to do that to another person's child behind their back. Ethically, it was dicey. I've since consulted with my lawyer, as many commenters suggested, and she advised me against it because, no matter the results, it could make me look bad in a potential divorce proceeding. But I really wish I had done it anyway and just not told anyone, because I so badly need to know, and I still don't know for sure. Likewise, I wanted to tell Sophie in confidence, but the more I thought about it, even that seemed over the line. It felt wrong to plant such ideas in her mind about her father without even talking to him first. So, what I ended up doing was confronting Luke and Amy. Many comments suggested this as well. I finally told both of them that we needed to have a serious talk. It felt counterproductive to approach just one of them, because I figured they would tell the other in their own words before I could properly prepare. I wanted them both to hear what I had to say. Once all the kids were at school, I laid out all of my suspicions and the reasons for them. I made it clear how much I loved both of them, but that a combination of clues had led me to notice the similarities between Luke and Amy's children, and I didn't even list all of them in my original post. For example, Luke has been a sleepwalker in the past, and so have Sophie, Tom, and Adam. I told them, over and over, how much they meant to me and how I didn't want to believe it, but the thought had crept into my mind in the past. How I had dismissed it before, but now, with Tom and Sophie having crushes on each other, it became necessary to ask the question. So I asked if they had ever crossed the line, if Luke had ever been unfaithful, if there was even the slightest possibility that any of Amy's children were his. I was just trying not to cry. They reacted exactly as I would have expected. Their responses were so perfect and well rehearsed that I genuinely can't tell if it was honest emotion or powerful gaslighting. Amy was more upset than Luke, at least, more outwardly upset. She was angry, offended at the accusation. Luke just seemed heartbroken by it. Maybe they were acting, but I don't know. Somehow, they had reasonable responses to all the points I brought up, and they asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Why had I never objected to them spending alone time together before, and why did it suddenly bother me now? Do Amy's children really resemble Luke that much, or are traits like hair color pretty basic to share in common? The whole family had always treated Amy and her kids as part of our unit, and I had even commended Luke in the past for stepping up and being a father figure to Amy's kids since they didn't have one, so why was I now saying it was a bad thing? What exactly did I want them to do? How could I think such a thing about them? And why had I waited so long to say something? Luke was more understanding than Amy. He respected my feelings, or at least he acted like he did. Amy, on the other hand, seemed to feel more betrayed by what I said. I ended up apologizing several times, even though I'm not sure I did anything wrong. Luke also apologized for anything he'd done that might have made me think he was unfaithful. When I asked Amy more pointedly, if not Luke, then who had fathered her children, she snapped back that it was none of my business. I could tell she was in no mood to get personal or vulnerable with me after my accusations. I'm not proud to say that I lost my temper and said that after everything we had done for her and her children, such information wasn't a lot to ask, perhaps she owed it to us. I regretted the words as soon as I said them. Amy shouted back that I had never done anything for her, that it was Luke and his parents who had kept her afloat all these years, not me. She launched into a longer tirade, accusing me of always acting superior to her. I don't believe I did that, though it's possible I unintentionally gave off that vibe. Luke did his best to calm her down, but the tension in the room was undeniable. I don't know, I just don't know. It's driving me to the edge of madness. There is a way to be certain, of course, not certain of my husband's fidelity, but of the paternity of Amy's children. So I asked Luke, for my own peace of mind, for the sake of our daughter, and for our family unit, if he could please get a DNA test done, a paternity test. I went on to explain that I knew he disliked and distrusted such things, but I really needed this. I could see the pain in Luke's eyes. Maybe it was an act, but he seemed genuinely hurt that I was asking for this, that his word, that he had always been faithful, wasn't enough for me. But, very reluctantly, he agreed to participate in a DNA test. Unfortunately, Amy did not agree, and that's where we hit a roadblock. I was afraid of this. Amy was infuriated at the entire concept and told me in no uncertain terms that I would not be getting samples of her children's DNA. She basically told me to go F myself for even asking. I pressed Luke, but honestly, he was a bit useless in this situation, though probably right. He tried to convince Amy, but she wouldn't hear of it. When I pushed him for further support, he kind of shrugged, saying he couldn't force her to get the test done. And he's right, if she refuses, that's really a dead end. I've looked into it quite a bit and even consulted my lawyer. There's no way to proceed without Amy's cooperation. The problem is, Luke could, in theory, petition the court to demand a paternity test for Tom and the others. The issue is that to do this, he'd essentially be admitting that he slept with Amy and believes her children could be his. That would be the version of events he'd have to maintain. But Luke has staunchly insisted that nothing ever happened with Amy, that he never cheated on me. Whether or not he's being honest about this is another story, but he'd have to go on record making a claim that he isn't prepared to make. He is certain the children aren't his and has no intention of fighting for custody of them. So, even though a legal route exists, Luke won't pursue it because it would contradict his insistence on being faithful. So, no judge is going to compel Amy to submit DNA samples from her children. Tom is also old enough that his consent would be required, and if both he and Amy refuse to participate, it's unlikely Luke would have a case. He'd have to target one of Amy's younger children, like one of the twins, but he doesn't want to do that. He's unwilling to take his best friend to court to prove something that, in his words, he already knows isn't true. Luke is asking me to please let this go and trust him because pursuing it further will fracture everything. And according to my lawyer, it's not realistic anyway. For Luke to establish paternity, he would have to admit to an affair in the first place, and he's not willing to do that. If he did, that alone would be all the proof I needed to confirm my suspicions, even if I would need more for a court case. I pressed Luke further about Tom and Sophie, insisting that I didn't want them dating. Luke agreed, and apparently, Amy still agrees. Luke plans to have a serious talk with Tom and go into protective Papa Bear mode. Among other things, he's going to remind Tom that once he turns 18 in a couple of months, being intimate with Sophie will literally be a crime. I wouldn't actually press charges, as I know Tom wouldn't do anything against Sophie's will, but I'm not above implying the threat, and thankfully, Luke isn't either. I did ask Luke if he'd be open to potentially swiping a sample of Tom's DNA for a private paternity test, but he was very hesitant. Like me, he views it as unethical. He also pointed out that if we did this and Amy found out, it would likely mean the end of our friendship with her. Luke believes that things are still in a salvageable state, where Amy and I could reconcile and become friends again, and I can see how much he wants that to happen. But if I did a DNA test on Tom behind Amy's back and she found out, she would likely hit the roof, and honestly, I wouldn't entirely blame her, though I'd be very interested to see the results. Luke ended up going to see Amy and spending the night. I know you're probably cringing and throwing up your hands, and trust me, I wasn't happy about it either. That was a very long conversation. But he was adamant that he needed to perform damage control, so they spent the night together, with Luke insisting that nothing happened. I didn't sleep a wink and kept texting him for updates. From what I can gather, Amy will cool off, but she needs some time. When Luke and I talked things over the next morning, it was an emotionally fulfilling conversation. We ended up agreeing to take the kids, our kids, not Amy's, to visit their grandparents for a few days. It was an impromptu visit, but we've done it before, and they were delighted to have us. I really just wanted our family to spend some time together, away from Amy's side of the family, so to speak. I always love seeing my in-laws. I'll refer to them as Jim, 75M, and Kat, 67F. I know Reddit is famous for stories about the mother-in-law from hell, but in my life, that couldn't be further from the truth. I feel safe with them, to the point that, when they noticed how distant Luke and I seemed from each other, I finally relented and confessed my fears. I told them about my anxiety, that I suspected Amy and Luke might be having an affair, and that Amy's children could be his. Here's where things got a little interesting. When I told them what I was feeling, Kat gave Jim this pointed look and let out a big, dramatic sigh. It turns out, Kat has had similar misgivings to mine. Over the years, she's genuinely suspected that Luke and Amy were closer than they'd ever admit, and that they may have crossed the line in the past. Jim, on the other hand, refuses to even entertain the idea. He's always insisted that Kat is seeing things that aren't there, maintaining that Luke and Amy are like siblings and would never do such a thing. Kat thinks his stance is naive, pointing out that even though she and Jim had taken Amy in and loved her like a daughter, that doesn't mean Luke viewed her as a sister, or that Amy viewed him as a brother. Jim continued to insist that Luke and Amy have always been like siblings, and I could tell he and Kat had already had this conversation before. They kept going in circles, with Kat getting exasperated. She pointed out that, surrogate siblings or not, Luke and Amy aren't actually brother and sister, so nothing would have stopped them from being physical together if they felt mutual attraction. At that point, Jim just sighed and walked away from the conversation. It became clear that Kat has privately wondered for years whether Amy's children might have been fathered by Luke. This is part of why she has always treated them as her grandchildren. To be clear, I never minded that. I also don't fault Kat for not voicing these concerns to me sooner. She had no proof, and she saw far less of Luke and Amy's closeness in our adult lives than I did. As for the kids, they're doing all right. I don't know what Amy told her children, but the general consensus, the official version of events, is that Amy and I had a fight and need a break from each other. That's what Luke and I told our children. When they pressed for more details, Luke defended me and shut down further questions, saying it wasn't their business. I'm not sure if Amy stuck to that version, but our children and hers still have each other's phone numbers and social media, so they've presumably been in contact over the last couple of days. I suspect my kids have kept Amy's kids in the loop with any updates, and if Amy had told them anything significant, they probably would have relayed that information to my children. It's clear that Sophie and Tom are still very close. I did try to talk to Sophie about it more, but the timing was off. She rejected my counsel and interpreted my reinforced reluctance as being related to my fight with Amy. Sophie insisted she wasn't dating Tom, though I'm not entirely sure if that's true, but she made it clear that she was going to remain close friends with him. While she's not usually a disobedient child, she put her foot down on this one. To be fair, I can't really justify separating them or forbidding their friendship, they've known each other for years. Luke agrees with me on not allowing them to date, but he doesn't support the idea of preventing them from hanging out altogether. I wish I had a more definitive update. If anything significant happens in the next few days, I'll let you all know. I'm mostly just kicking myself for not going through with the secret DNA test, even just for my own peace of mind. Now, I feel like I've lost the only opportunity to get definitive proof one way or the other. Second update 1 day later. I didn't expect to have another update so soon, but after posting my last one, I did a lot of thinking about my kids. I ultimately decided that, whatever else happened, I needed to warn Sophie about the situation, and do so immediately. To hell with what it meant for Luke or the fallout with the other kids. Sophie needed to be aware of what she might be getting herself into. So, I discreetly kept Sophie out of school. Last night, we went back home, and this morning, I dropped everyone else off but saved Sophie for last. Instead of taking her to school, I drove past it and told her we needed to talk. That's always a frightening thing for a teenager to hear from a parent, but I quickly reassured her that she wasn't in trouble. I explained she needed to know the truth about why Amy and I were fighting and why her dating Tom was out of the question. I very gently told her that, because of Luke's closeness to Amy and the striking resemblance Tom bears to him, I had come to suspect that Luke and Amy may have been intimate at some point. I explained that if there was any chance Tom's father was actually Luke, then her dating him would be a significant problem. Sophie was quiet during all of this, and even after I had stopped talking to let her respond, she paused for quite a while before she finally said that we needed to get Tom and discuss this with him as well. I had no objections, so she texted him to meet with us. They're both skipping school today, but Sophie gets straight A's, and this is extremely important, so I looked the other way. Tom came to meet us, and Sophie had me relay what I had told her to him as well. I apologized to him for any indication I might have given that I didn't think he was good enough for my daughter, and to both of them for not telling the truth sooner. Tom and Sophie just gave each other this oddly knowing stare. And that's when they blew my mind. Sophie spoke first, with Tom backing her up. They revealed to me that, in fact, they had already known about Luke and Amy, or at least they had strongly suspected. Apparently, Tom had overheard conversations that were questionable, as well as the sounds of intimacy from Amy's room, sounds he would rather forget, but all signs pointed to Amy's lover being Luke. Tom had wondered for a very long time, and back in January, he finally voiced his fears to Sophie. She agreed with him. She had also noticed a strange sort of closeness between her father and his mother. They agreed that Luke was likely having an affair. They also agreed that, because of Kaylee's allergy, Luke might very well be her father. And if Kaylee was Luke's daughter, the rest of Tom's siblings could be Luke's as well. Tom could be Luke's kid himself. The math led them to the same conclusions as mine. So Sophie and Tom came up with a little plan. As it turns out, they are not in love. They never were. They're still just best friends, but they had the same instinct as me. They didn't want to blow up our entire family and social circle without more direct evidence, which Tom has been working on acquiring. Though Sophie very much wanted to tell me the truth, she was hesitant because she knew it would shatter me. She had no idea I was already suffering in silence. Sophie apologized for not voicing her suspicions sooner. Honestly, we both cried, and I made sure she understood that none of this was her fault and that I loved her very much. So, the bottom line is, Sophie and Tom already know they could be half-siblings and aren't actually interested in being a couple. That was their idea for how to rock the boat, to force Luke and Amy to do something about the situation rather than just keep making a fool of me. I also think it was Tom and Sophie's way of punishing them for their affair. Teenagers can be vindictive. So they concocted this idea that they wanted to date. Every flirtation I witnessed, every inappropriate touch, apparently all staged, and for the benefit of Luke, Amy, or both. This was supposed to make them sweat, and Sophie and Tom expected they would jump out of their seats to forbid it from happening. When I was the one who did instead, it kind of threw the kids for a loop. They couldn't understand why I cared more than the actual cheaters. They began to suspect that maybe I knew. Tom confronting me that one time about why can't I date Sophie was him trying to gauge if I knew or not. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. Sophie and Tom have always been close friends and confided in each other. Maybe I should be a little more concerned about how sneaky they've been, but honestly, I'm just so relieved they're not dating. Sure, they could be lying to throw off the scent, I guess, but they already knew they're likely related and didn't even blink when I told them. We even had a bit of a laugh together when Tom mentioned how he had been a little offended that I was so against him dating my daughter before. I kind of jokingly asked him, "So you don't think she's gorgeous?" And Tom, bless his heart, shrugged it off, saying, "She is, but so is my English teacher, and I'm not asking her out either." Either way, the question now is, where to go from here? We have to figure that out. I will say it's such a relief to have told Sophie, and I feel like an elephant has taken one of its feet off my chest. Having her in my corner, and Tom in my corner as well, means a lot to me. Even though I've basically just had it confirmed that Luke is sleeping with Amy, I kind of already knew that anyway. So now it's just a question of how to proceed. Tom has already volunteered to submit his DNA so I can compare it to Luke's, and both he and Sophie advise me not to tell Luke and Amy when I do this, which I agree with. They're both completely on my side, which means more to me than I can ever express to them. Tom has also been trying to set up a camera in Amy's room to catch her and Luke in the act. Sophie told me flat out that I needed to divorce her dad, and hearing that from my own daughter made it clearer than it's ever been. She's right. Third update 2 days later. First, a few points to address from the comments. I don't have any DNA test results back yet. That can take weeks. But now that I know Sophie is in no danger of dating a relative, the pressure is off. I'll get into this momentarily, but it frankly no longer matters if Luke fathered the children. I highly doubt my father-in-law is having an affair with Amy. At worst, he might know, or even just suspect, the truth about Amy and Luke. But it's also possible that he just refuses to believe they would do such a thing. I've been vague about details for privacy, but to put it very simply, Jim and Amy are both pretty white. Kat and Luke are not. Had Jim fathered Amy's babies, they would look different than they do. Nevertheless, I do have an update. First things first, I discussed this in the comments, but our little team has, supposedly, recruited my mother-in-law. I say supposedly because Sophie and Tom were going to talk to her about getting help with submitting the DNA test and, at the advice of my lawyer, I am staying out of the process. Officially, I told Sophie not to do it, and she said she wouldn't. My mother-in-law hasn't contacted me about it either, though we have been in touch. I'll get into that more in a moment. The bottom line is that I can honestly say I had no knowledge of any DNA test. Another bit of good news, I was digging through the paperwork in preparation for my divorce, wanting to get a head start against Luke, and one thing that came to my attention is that my name is on the paperwork for our home. Luke's name is not. I was the one who bought the house, and we always planned to add Luke onto the paperwork at some point, but we never got around to it, and eventually, the idea was forgotten. It was my lawyer, Paige, who pointed this out to me, and it felt like finding a winning lottery ticket on the ground. I don't know where I'd be without Paige. She's a dear friend from college who I reached out to, hat in hand, for help. She's been there for me this past week, not just as legal counsel but as the friend I really needed right now. The thing is, she's not our lawyer, mine and Luke's. We have our own family attorney who has helped us out of jams in the past. We clashed with our HOA a few years ago, not worth getting into right now, but Paige is a lawyer who specializes in family law and has handled divorces before. Luke remembers her from college and knows she went into law but doesn't know she's a divorce attorney. So I can have her over for coffee like we're just catching up, and he has no idea anything is going on. Turns out, he's not the only one who can hide someone under his spouse's nose under the guise of being a friend. So, on to the update. The last time I looked at Luke's phone was 3 months ago, around the time Sophie and Tom began claiming they wanted to date. I found nothing. While I know how to search for recently deleted photos and didn't see any, my comments taught me how to find recently deleted messages. So, when Luke was asleep, I did just that. I swiped his phone, brought it downstairs, and checked the recently deleted messages. I'm glad I did, but I also wish I hadn't, because I'm still reeling from the pain. Sure enough, a conversation with Amy had been deleted. Recent texts discuss the conflict between her and me, with Amy describing me as a problem and Luke trying to pacify her, without defending me at all, to be clear. They both alluded to how they had expected this for a while and just hoped it would never happen, presumably, me accusing them of having an affair. While the whole conversation, and the fact that it was deleted, was sketchy, nothing was outright admitted. So I scrolled a bit higher, to a few days before the fight. Amy's messages became a bit more flirty. Then I saw it, 5 days before I confronted them. Amy had sent Luke a selfie wearing nothing. Guys, I teared up. I knew it was true, I knew it in my bones, but seeing the proof still cut me like a hot knife. I exited the Messages app and checked Luke's recently deleted photos. Sure enough, the same selfie was there, along with others. Amy in various poses to show off. There were pictures of the two of them together, cuddled and pressed close like a couple. In some of these, she wasn't wearing anything. In some, they both weren't. There were videos. Amy sent Luke a video message of herself in her birthday suit, and I had to actually hear her voice, talking to him in a tone that made me sick, about how she was sending him a quick video to help him get through the day. In more than one video, she called him her boo, and hearing her call him that, I almost vomited. I stopped looking at that point. I'd seen enough. For about 5 minutes anyway, then a strange compulsion to keep searching led me to check Luke's laptop. I knew enough of his passcodes to access his iCloud storage and, yeah, basically more of the same. There were letters, long letters between them. I didn't have the heart to read past the first few lines of one of them, but I did read Luke mention our children. There were countless images of Amy, selfies of them together, videos where Amy appeared to be touching herself, and there were even smashed tapes of the two of them. Tom had previously offered to try and hide a camera in Amy's room, but, hell, he never needed to. Luke was hiding a whole treasure trove under my nose all along. I scrolled and scrolled. There were so many, going back years. Not all of it was dirty. There were some photos of Amy's kids too. One video was of Kaylee and the twins playing together when they were younger, with Luke and Amy's voices behind the camera. There were even old pictures of Luke and Amy from when they were younger. I'd even say teenagers. I snapped. All these years, I had been telling myself I had to be wrong, that it couldn't be true. Well, it was true. I know no one forced me to look at as much of the evidence as I did, but I'm still hurting very badly from having seen it, and in that moment, I wanted to act, so I did. I called Paige, my lawyer. It was the middle of the night, so I had to call her twice, but she picked up. Though I had woken her, when I asked her to come by and said it was an emergency, she agreed. I also asked her to draw up the paperwork and have it ready. She told me she'd already had it prepared since I first reached out to her. As I waited for her, I went through the necessary channels on Luke's laptop to make sure he wouldn't be able to remotely disconnect our access to his little stash, changing passwords and all that. Paige arrived, and I went outside to greet her in the car. I spent a good half hour in the passenger seat just crying, and she was great about that. Afterward, I passed her Luke's phone and laptop, with all the information she needed to use them. She warned me that this could be considered theft, so I asked her to forward and print out copies of everything she could and then bring the items back, because I just couldn't bear to do it myself. She agreed. I went back inside and then packed up Luke's things while the house slept. At one point, Owen got up to use the bathroom and asked me what I was doing, but I told him I was just cleaning. Luke stirred once or twice while I was in the bedroom but didn't wake. I got most of his things packed into trash bags and loaded up the car. That's when I woke him up and told him to come outside. He was confused and half asleep, but he did notice things were missing. I ignored his questions and just told him to come with me, so he followed me outside. Once we were by the car, I pulled out the divorce papers and officially handed them to him. That was when he figured out what I was doing, and he tried to talk me out of it. He tried to be sweet with me, to be tender. He kept insisting that he loved me and that there had never been anything with Amy, continually trying to persuade me not to tear our family apart. Even 2 weeks ago, I might have wilted under him because the manipulation and gaslighting were truly masterclass, but I can see through it now. I didn't tell him that I knew he was full of it. I didn't tell him what I had seen. I just told him we were finished. He tried a different approach. He refused to go, firmly stating that our children were his too and that even if we were separating, I had no right to just decide the kids would stay with me over him. This was when I very coldly presented the paperwork, reminding him that the house is in my name, and told him under no circumstances would my kids be staying with Amy. He argued for a while longer, but in the end, he decided to be the bigger person and keep the peace. At that moment, I didn't care where he went. Before he left, he did ask about his phone and laptop, and I waved him off by saying they were in one of the bags. I couldn't sleep for the rest of that night. I cried more. Eventually, I realized I'd have to wake my children up early and explain as much as I could. Naturally, I woke Sophie first. I told her that I had kicked her father out and discovered evidence of an affair on his devices. I didn't specify what kind of evidence, and she didn't ask. I then woke up the others and gently told them that their dad had gone to stay somewhere else for a while. I wasn't sure where, but from now on, things were going to be different. Louise was the one to ask if we were getting divorced, and I couldn't lie to her. I told her yes. Owen asked when they could see their father again, and I wanted to cry. Sophie was a big help, urging her siblings to be sympathetic to me right now and worry about Dad later. I knew better than to poison them against their father. Paige had warned me about that as well, so I only told Sophie that the affair was confirmed, as she had already been in the know. However, as the kids were getting ready for school, Owen approached me and asked point blank if it was about Amy, and if Luke was going to be with her instead of me. I couldn't answer, but I suppose that was an answer on its own. I got the kids to school, and my next step was calling to have the locks changed. I knew Luke would be back for his devices before long, but thankfully Paige returned with them before he showed up again. It was a very quick visit. She just told me that everything was accomplished and that she had records of everything we would need in court. Sure enough, Luke turned up an hour later, demanding to know where his laptop and phone were. I had set them back in our bedroom like they had never moved, and I just told him he had forgotten them. He insisted that I had said they were in one of the bags, so I shrugged him off and told him I must have been mistaken. After he grabbed them, he tried again to reason with me, but I just showed him the door. I knew the kids would start coming home from school soon, and I think he was trying to delay leaving so he could see them. I wasn't having it. I started shouting again and sent him on his way. I'm still in absolute pain and despair over what I saw. I don't know if he'll realize that anyone went through his devices and made copies of the evidence or if he suspects I saw anything, but he didn't say so. After he left, I cried once again. I talked to my mother-in-law that night. Apparently, Luke did show up at his parents' house, which surprised me since I was so certain he'd stay with Amy. But maybe even he knows how suspicious that would look to the children and doesn't want to rock the boat too much. Maybe he knows I'm more likely to let my children see their grandmother than Amy at this point, and he wants to see them to give his version of events. That is not happening. Kat already shared the version of events Luke told her and Jim. He claims I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, that he wishes he could help me, but my paranoia is causing me to lash out and turn violent. I was never violent, I shoved him away when he tried to hold me, that's all. What's so hilarious is that he didn't mention Amy at all to his parents. He didn't even frame it as me falsely believing he was having an affair. Even though that's his story when talking to me, he left Amy out of it entirely when talking to his parents. Kat noticed that. She believes me. Jim doesn't know what to believe anymore. According to Kat, he seemed very troubled by what he heard from all sides. As for Amy, she's been radio silent. Tom has told Sophie that she's acting like nothing is wrong but is clearly stressed out. When her children ask, she makes similar claims, that I'm having some kind of emotional or nervous breakdown and pushing her and Luke away. She doesn't mention anything about my accusing them of an affair but still puts it all on me. Amy hasn't reached out to talk to me directly, and I haven't tried talking to her since our big argument. I haven't told my kids much, just that I'm having disagreements with Luke and Amy, though I made it very clear it's not a question of my mental health. Honestly, I think they all kind of know what's going on. Sophie continues to be my rock, as I try to be for her and the others, and Tom continues to be our spy in the ranks. Right now, my biggest regret is the stress this is causing the children, which I knew it would, but it still needed to be done. My life has fallen apart, but it was never my life. Fourth update 6 days later. In my last post, there were several criticisms toward Paige. You guys will like this update because, as it turns out, you weren't the only ones who had issues with her. Regarding the deed being in my name, it's not an absolute hook, line, and sinker, but Paige is convinced that, combined with the fact that I've been the one paying the mortgage, I stand a very good chance. It could be interpreted as common marital property, but I'm going for primary custody with supervised visits anyway. I'm playing hardball. Some also question whether I should still be posting these, but as long as it's anonymous, I'm in the clear. It doesn't matter if someone who knows me could figure out I posted this. I haven't used any real names or revealed my location, or anything like that. As for the laptop, even Paige admitted that was questionable, but technically I gave her permission, and she was only doing what I could have done on my own. I just really didn't want to go through all of that content myself. As for the divorce papers, Paige had them filled out after I first contacted her. My serving them to Luke was more ceremonial. She still contacted him later to officially serve him and request his lawyer's details. But before he could respond, I had already done something a little sneaky. I reached out to our family attorney, the one who had always represented both me and Luke during our marriage. Let's call him Zach. He helped us out of a jam with the HOA a while back. Contrary to some of the comments' suggestions, I can't just go around consulting every lawyer in town to lock my husband out of hiring them. That's considered bad faith, and judges don't look kindly on it. However, this was Zach. He had been our attorney for years, and I felt I had just as much right to him as Luke did. And I got there first. So, I was able to secure our family lawyer, Zach, and met with both him and Paige. And wow, do they not like each other? Zach brought up some of the same concerns mentioned in my comments, arguing that some of Paige's actions were in the gray area and urging me to hire him instead for the divorce. This caused a bit of tension, as Paige specializes in family law, and this is her expertise. So, I've decided to consult both of them moving forward. Interestingly, Zach actually thinks it's a good thing I made these posts, as they can't do much other than prove my sanity when Luke and Amy try to argue otherwise. Overall, I am doing better. I've been talking to a friend in real life, the mom of one of Sophie's friends. I also have therapy scheduled for myself, and I intend to look into family therapy as well. When my kids ask what's going on, I simply tell them that their father and I are having adult problems and it's nothing they need to worry about. That worked for about a day. Sophie warned me they were planning to confront me as a group, and they did, asking if Dad had cheated on me with Amy. Clearly, they've been talking about it, and maybe they've been wondering for longer than I anticipated. Even though I have absolute proof, I was hesitant to tell them as much, and let me explain why. I wouldn't tell them about the explicit content I found. I would simply say I discovered messages between Luke and Amy revealing their affair. But, with the exception of Sophie, I know they wouldn't be satisfied with that. Carter, curious little sweetheart that he is, would likely want to see the messages himself. So instead, when my kids asked me directly if their dad had cheated on me, I simply said, I believe he did, yes, with as much sincerity as I could muster. I think they believe me. Tom and Sophie are texting nonstop, and from what I can gather, there's doubt among Amy's children as well. They seem to question whether this is really about me losing my mind or about their mother being too close to my husband. I think it's slowly sinking in for poor Jim that what he didn't want to believe is very much possible, and it's happening. I haven't shown him or Kat any of the letters or anything like that. Since they're hosting Luke, I haven't had much contact with them at all, but I did have one phone call with Kat where we wished each other well, and that was nice. In the background, I could hear shouting, and though Kat quickly went outside, I caught what sounded like Jim shouting at Luke. Jim never usually shouts, he's the calmest man I've ever met, so in a way, I'm worried about him, but I'm also relieved that the wool is being pulled from his eyes. According to Kat, Luke is still staunchly denying everything. He was pretty upset when he found out I had poached Zach, though, which gave me a bit of grim satisfaction. The test results came back. Sophie and Tom tested their DNA against each other to see if they truly are blood siblings. Here's a surprise, according to the test, they're not. They don't share any DNA. To everyone who believed Jim had fathered Amy's babies, here is definitive proof that he did not, because the test would have revealed that too. But I never believed it anyway. Sophie has her doubts and wonders if the results were faulty and if we should take another test to be absolutely certain, but I'm not really worried about that. I'm more confused than anything. I was so certain Tom had to be Luke's son. He was too. Now he doesn't know what to think, and I don't either. I obviously now know the affair happened and lasted years, and I know from the letters that Kaylee is Luke's child, or at least both he and Amy seem to believe she is, which confirms they were intimate 15 years ago. Now I'm just wondering for Tom's sake, who, if not Luke, is his father. He does kind of look like Luke, but that might just be coincidence. In general, everything was quiet for a few days, until it wasn't. Until she finally showed her face, my best friend Amy. I'm so happy I installed Ring cameras everywhere, as you are about to understand. Sure enough, Amy turned up on my doorstep and asked to talk. She had a relaxed demeanor and did not raise her voice. Assuming she was approaching me on Luke's behalf, I told her that I wasn't interested in talking to her and to just go away. She did not leave, but she didn't make a scene either. She persisted in telling me we needed to have a conversation. The kids weren't home, and I did have cameras inside. I was also recording her on my phone and being discreet about it, so eventually I relented and let her in. I don't know if she realized she was on camera. We sat down on the couch, and she instantly got into the reason for her visit. Turns out, she and Luke know, or suspect, that I procured damning material from his laptop. Amy accused me of going through his devices and told me that anything I found was not my business and that I needed to delete it. That was all she had to say. No apology, no admission of guilt, didn't take responsibility for her own behavior. Hell, she might have known I was recording her, because she didn't even directly acknowledge what the sensitive material on Luke's laptop actually was. So I confronted her, letting out some of my anger. I asked how she could have the nerve to make demands of me. I asked her why she and Luke would do a thing like this in the first place. Why had they seen fit to spend all these years betraying me? I posed the question that I'd been wondering about for a long time, and as I expected, I got no answer. Literally, Amy didn't seem to really hear me even as I confronted her. She seemed like she was stressed, panicked even, but she was keeping it under wraps. She ignored my questions and accusations and just kept telling me to delete whatever content from Luke's laptop that I had. She said that if I wanted to divorce Luke, that was my call, but not to drag her into it. Oh, that made me so mad. I kept my temper, but I did snap back that she was already very much in it. Amy just kept repeating herself, telling me to delete whatever I found, so I just refused. I asked her, point blank, why I should. Why did I have any reason to? Amy got more aggressive, raising her voice. She was trying to intimidate me, but I held my ground. She told me that this wasn't about me and that I needed to just do as she said, that it was very important. So, I asked again, why? And yet again, she would not answer. So I asked her if Luke had sent her to do this or if she had shown up on her own. No answer to that either. It was like talking to a brick wall. So I asked her to leave. Just as I'd been afraid of, she wouldn't go. She refused to leave until I had deleted everything I'd found in front of her. I couldn't help laughing. I told her no, that wasn't going to happen. This was where I could see her starting to freak out more. In another moment, she got up, ran into the other room, and grabbed my laptop. Before I could stop her, she smashed it on the floor. I really don't know why she thought that would work or get her the outcome she wanted. I think she was just panicking. Obviously, I still have everything, except now I need to buy a new laptop, and sadly, she did this out of the camera's frame, but it's fine. All of my important files are backed up, and at that moment, I was more concerned that Amy would do something else drastic. She looked like she was going to have a breakdown. I tried again, very calmly, to tell her that she needed to leave or I would call the police. She refused again and just kept repeating her demand that I drop this whole cheating angle and divorce Luke without trying to argue that an affair took place. At that point, I just stared at her, the woman I had considered one of my dearest friends in all the world. And I told her that I didn't owe her anything, but she owed her children the truth, that they had the right to know where they came from, who Luke really was to them. Amy bristled and told me it was none of my business, that I didn't understand her family and I needed to back off. She kept going back to this idea that I could divorce Luke, but I must not claim he'd had an affair with her. I just told her that I didn't need her permission to handle my divorce as I wanted, and told her again to leave. She got more and more desperate, and her anger escalated to the point that she physically attacked me. I did not expect her to actually do this. I'm not much of a fighter, but I do know the human body pretty well and where it's weakest. She hurt me pretty badly, but I got her off me. That part was entirely on camera, and the whole audio was recorded on my phone. She finally left after that, and I immediately called to file a police report. I had the strangest feeling she'd try something similar and wanted to beat her to the punch. I was able to clean myself up by the time I had to face my kids, and while I downplayed the story, I did not lie to them about why I had a black eye. I told them, for their own safety, to steer clear of Amy. I also sent the footage to Paige and Zach, as well as pictures of my injured state before I cleaned up. They'd also printed out the letters that reference Kaylee as Luke's child. I really feel like Amy just screwed herself over on all this. I don't know what her motives were. Was she protecting Luke? Was this his idea? Does she just really not want the world to know she's a homewrecker? As if people didn't know already? The more of my social circle I talk to and inform of the basics, the more people are confessing that they had wondered in the past if Luke was cheating on me but didn't have any concrete proof. I suppose Amy doesn't want her kids to know who fathered them, which does line up, but I'm still not sure about Tom. I didn't ask Amy about him in particular. 5th update 6 days later. Hey guys, it's been a rough week. A lot has happened. I don't really want to talk about all of it in detail, so I'm going to keep this short. I know I never shut up, it's just how I am, but I'm going to be much more brief this time around. Luke has a lawyer now. I don't know him, but he met with Zach and Paige. To everyone saying I should have Amy arrested, I probably could have if I had shown the police the video. Instead, I just sent it to my lawyer. Maybe this makes me foolish, but even now, I think part of me is still trying to protect people I once loved and go easy on them. But everything's been on hold for the past few days, because Jim had a heart attack. I saw Luke and I saw Amy, and Amy's kids, at the funeral. It was the first time we were all together since before all this happened. Nobody talked about what's going on, short of Amy briefly apologizing for what happened before. She did seem sincere, I'll give her that, but I wasn't about to call her out anyway. Amy, Luke, and Kat all seemed pretty devastated. I was too, but we all agreed not to argue or talk about the divorce and to just let the day be a ceasefire to focus on Jim. Luke and I had a nice conversation about him. I've been spending time with my kids and taking a couple of days off work. I have enough on the back burner. Luke also saw the kids twice, before and after the funeral, with me present. It went well. At my direction, and Sophie's, they didn't mention Amy, and Luke didn't try anything funny with any of them. I think he does miss them and hate that he can't see them, thanks to all this. The kids are also pretty upset about losing Grandpa, on top of not being able to see Dad as much as before. I don't think any of them blame me, but that's far from the point, frankly. Carter slept in my bed the last 3 nights. I'll get more into this in the future when I have the energy to talk about what's going on in more detail, but whoever suggested that Kat lied about the test results was correct. She never sent them in. She confessed as much to me. I guess she didn't feel comfortable going behind her son's back. But she felt comfortable lying to me to protect him? Until she didn't, until she felt guilty, and she came clean. Under the circumstances, I'm not angry with her, but I know better than to trust her anymore. As far as I know, she did not tell Luke about the test, but it means Tom could still be Luke's son, probably is. My lawyers finished going through Luke and Amy's letters with a fine-tooth comb. The bottom line is they definitely found what it was that Amy didn't want me to see, and I now completely understand why she was so panicked. It has to do with why Amy and Luke didn't marry conventionally. They did something very bad. But this is genuinely something that I'm not sure I should be talking about, even on an anonymous internet post. I haven't even been able to collect my feelings about what Amy and Luke have done, especially with everything else going on, so I don't know if I should be more explicit. I'm sorry, I know that's not what anyone wanted to hear, but please try to understand. Paige agreed with me that when in doubt, don't post it. I've told my lawyers to put a pin in it for now because I'm in no fit state to figure out how to proceed with it or if I should use it against them. I'm just feeling like crap, honestly. It's difficult not to blame myself for Jim. I can only imagine Luke and Amy are blaming themselves too. I know they're bad people. I don't forgive them. But this tore them apart as it did me, and I think all three of us feel like the divorce stressed Jim out to the point where it may have contributed. He already had heart disease. And in particular, I blame myself for showing him what I showed him. I showed him proof of the affair shortly before he died. I'll be carrying that with me for a very long time, even if I shouldn't. I'll update again whenever I do. I'm sorry.